Okay, jumping in again, video number 2, we're looking at the pharynx. You see here the most superior part of the pharynx is the nasopharynx, and that's found at the posterior part of the nasal cavity. Hopefully that will be easy to remember. The oropharynx comes next at the posterior part of the oral cavity. And then we have in some places it's called the laryngopharynx, and that's what we're going to call it, okay? And this is going to be inferior to the oropharynx, and it's in the area where the larynx is, okay? So the laryngopharynx. If you look at the regions where food and air can both be, or areas that are common passageways for food and air, we can have both in the oropharynx and in the laryngopharynx. We're not really supposed to have food up here, although sometimes you can see those videos where babies have like sneezed and a puff of air will send like a spaghetti noodle out the nose. You can see through this diagram why that is even possible. So that's pretty cool, but we typically don't want food in the nasopharynx, okay? And there's another view of that. You can take a look. On this one, I just wanted to show you this tube called the pharyngotympanic tube. And so this is involved in your hearing. So this also called the eustachian tube. It does feed into this pharynx. And so sometimes when people say that you need to like pop your ears, they tell you to go ahead and plug your nose, and that's going to kind of send a burst of air out here that will equalize this pressure. I don't recommend that because you risk bursting this eardrum right here. And so that's not a great idea. But I just wanted you to see the connection between this auditory region right here and the pharynx, that they are connected. And take a look also at the tonsils here that we've talked about in the lymphatic immune system. All righty. Let's jump right into talking about the larynx. Okay, you guys saw this on the video about the, oh goodness, I am blanking on the name. The bronchoscopy. There you go. So you saw the bronchoscopy going into the nasal cavity all the way down here into the larynx. And going into this trachea through the larynx so that he could get down in and examine those bronchial passageways with the camera. And so we see the opening to the larynx right here, okay, between those two vocal cords. But this is the larynx. You can see the cartilage here, the different views of the larynx. And it's cool because the larynx routes air and food into the proper channels, and we'll see how it does that here in a moment. The book is really cool about talking about why do we need this really firm, solid cartilage to form the larynx and the trachea. We'll talk about that in a moment. So here we see this opening of the larynx, and the opening is called the glottis, okay? And so basically here we're looking at the vocal folds. Here's a vocal fold, there's a vocal fold. And these opening up, air moving through is what we have when we have speech. Okay, that's what causes speech. Here we see the glottis closed. Here we see the glottis open. And so because of that, we'll talk about this structure called the epiglottis here in just a moment, but take a look at this cartilage. So this is called the thyroid cartilage, and it is hyaline cartilage, very tough, very strong, as are these rings of cartilage here in the trachea. Okay, so these structures are not like bone, but they are very, very strong and supportive. So the epiglottis is called the guardian of the airway because it's this little flap right up here that basically protects the superior opening of the larynx. So when you're talking, it covers the, excuse me, the esophagus so that you don't, well, let me rephrase that. When you are eating, basically, you don't want to inhale what you are eating. Okay, so this epiglottis is going to come and cover the glottis so that you don't choke and bring food or drink into your lungs. Okay, so that's why we call it the guardian of the airways. So a lot of times if you're choking, it's because you've been talking while you've been eating, so that epiglottis kind of doesn't know what to do. Okay. All right, jumping into talking about the trachea, we see here the trachea connecting the larynx with the two bronchial passageways that lead into the different lungs. These walls are reinforced with this really strong cartilage because we don't want these to collapse in between breaths. So the cartilage is really good about keeping